What's up everyone? Today I want to talk about one of the best builds for leveling a Sorceress in Path of Exile 2. And it's a Cast on Freeze Comet build. So the way this works is, there's a gem called Cast on Freeze. And every time you freeze an enemy, it builds up a meter. And when it's called energy, when energy hits maximum, you bring down whatever gems are attached. So we attach Comet, so that whenever we freeze enemies, Comets come down. And Comet is by far one of the highest damage abilities that we have on Sorceress. So when we have that in the Cast on Freeze, we get to bring down all these comets without the long cast time. So yeah, this is easily the best build I've tried so far. I tried lightning, I've tried fire, and this is easily the best. I leveled from like Act 2 to pretty much end game using a freeze build. Definitely the build I'd recommend. There's loads of people playing this. There's loads of people like talking about this. I don't know who originally came up with the combo, the Cast on Freeze Comet combo. I saw Rax playing this when I was in like Act 3, and I tried it. So this is my variant of this, but shout out to everyone who's made their own version of this, because it's so strong. So yeah, let's get into it. Okay, so let's get into this in more detail. I'm going to start by going over how this combo works, how Spirit works, that kind of thing. And then I'll get into more detail on, how to start this in the early game when you don't have all these abilities. And then I'll go over the full gem setup and then the full passive tree setup. And it's all going to be linked down below as well. I've made a build for this already, which will be down in the description and in the comments, which will have, everything, the gems, the passive. So if you want to just have that as a quick reference, or, have that while you're leveling, that's there as well. But yeah, let's get into it. So let's start with the combo. So we use this thing here, Cast on Freeze. And the way this works is, as you're freezing enemies, you trigger a thing in the top left. There'll be a little bar in the top left, and it'll have a number. The more enemies you freeze, you get this thing called energy. Once it hits 100, you bring down anything that's attached. So anything that you put in here will trigger when you hit 100. Now, there's a way we can have 100 every single freeze. So it doesn't go up. It just goes 0, 100, 0, 100. I'll show you how to do that. But what happens is, every time we freeze an enemy, we bring down a comet. And then any of the support gems attached to it will also trigger as well. So we have Spell Echo, which means that after we've brought down the comet, after a short delay, another one comes down. And then here we have Impetus. Support skills gain 40% increased energy, which helps us get to that like constant trigger. So it's every single cast triggers a comet. The only other thing you need is if you go into your skill tree, we start here as a sorceress. If you work up to the top and then you come across, or if you go up this diagonal up here, you get this node here, this little cluster. You want to take this here, energy. Meta skills gain 8% increased energy. If you press Alt and hover over meta, it says here, skill gems that use trigger or otherwise apply effects to socketed gems. So our Cast on Freeze is a meta skill. And at level, I think my gems are level 14 now, I get like 96% energy per freeze. With this, I get 100. So as you're leveling, you're going to need at least 1 point in here. Maybe you're going to need 2. I needed 1 the whole time I was leveling to get it up a bit higher. So yeah, you might want to come down to here and get these points just to make sure you're hitting 100% freeze every hit. It's not the end of the world if you're only getting like 50, because then you're getting a comet every other freeze. But having 100, you really feel the difference. 2 comets every freeze is so much damage. If you're really early on Sorcerer, this relies on something called Spirit. So if I turn it off, you right click it to activate it. If I turn it off, and we also have the Ice Armor, I'll turn that off as well just to show you. So these things here take Spirit to use. So you can see here near our mana bar at the bottom right, we have this like gold yellow thing going around. And that's because we have mana and we have Spirit. When you turn on Cast on Freeze, you reserve 60 Spirit. So you reserve a set amount of Spirit. So you need to make sure you have Spirit available to use this. As you're leveling, you will unlock items that give you Spirit. And then on your gear as well, you can also find Spirit. So I've got 38 Spirit there on my chest piece. So as you're playing, you want to be looking out for Spirit gear to give you more of this. Worst case scenario, you'll have Cast on Freeze and you won't have enough to use Arctic Armor as well. But ideally, you'll get both. So yeah, that's pretty much most of the combo. Okay, now let's go over all the other gems and all the other abilities. And I will just say I've changed a lot of things as I've leveled. I've improved things where I can and made things better, more efficient. So this is it's going to do you really well for leveling. But if you can think of anything better, if you can think of any other changes you would make, let people know in the comments. Let me know in the comments, because I'm all down for improvements. But this is where I've got it, and it works really, really well. So first we have Arctic Armor. I run that with no adjustments. What you really want in here is the gem that gives you mana. There's a gem that gives you mana while ever it's active, mana regen while active. But when you put that in, let me see if I can find it. This one here, Clarity. 30% increased mana regen rate while a support skill is active. This is what you really want to have socketed in your Arctic armor. But the way that spirit works is when you put a gem in here, you increase the amount of spirit required. And you can see here, I got no spirit. I got 0 spirit left. I got 8 spirit left. So if I had more spirit, I would have clarity in there. But you know, it is what it is. Then we have the Frost Blast. You'll have this early on, the Frost Bomb, and this is easily your main source of damage until you get Comet. So early on, this is what you'll be using. You want to use this every single time it's off cooldown, because you can see the damage numbers here. You've got damage 2,600, and then you see for Comet, it's like 4,300. So this is your big damage here while you're leveling. What I had in here is I had Spell Echo in here while I was leveling, because you know you don't have Cast on Freeze, so you would run this with Spell Echo, and that would trigger it twice. And then you want to get Magnified Effect. Support gems have 40% more area of effect, because you don't have the Comet while leveling. This will be your big AoE damage. So this will capture all of the mobs. Then you can have Fast Forward. Supported skills have 30% less skill effect. That means that, so if you've not used this, when you drop this, it ticks down a few seconds, and then it blasts massive freeze damage. This reduces that tick time. So as mobs are moving around, as enemies are moving, you'll make sure you catch them if they're moving around early enough. And then finally, Strip Away is good, but that's kind of like more of a later one once you've got 3 gem slots. And that's my setup at full endgame. Next, you'd go for Frostbolt. This is whenever this is on cooldown, you would use Frostbolt. This is your main, just hold the button down ability. I still use that now. You want to put Scattershot in here. It deals less damage and has less cast speed, which is annoying, but there's 2 additional projectiles, and the amount of negatives don't outweigh the positives. So you always want to have that on. Then you can take Cold Penetration. The way that works is you penetrate cold resistance. So all enemies have a resistance to elements. When you're fighting an enemy, in the bottom right, there'll be a little snowflake, and that's their cold resistance. So you've got to always make sure you're trying to lower their resistances to deal more damage. This will automatically penetrate 30% cold resistance. And then finally, I went for Arcane Tempo to have more cast speed, because this is just a really good ability. It's good to just be able to just hold the button down and just throw loads out. Next up, Cast on Freeze. We already talked about this in the first section, but yeah, Comet, Spell Echo to have double Comet, and then Impetus to get our energy up. Okay, and then while leveling, I'll use the gem to show you. While you're leveling, you know, you start out with these spells here. You got Frost. I don't think Ice Nova is that good. You get Frostbolt, huge. Cold Snap's pretty good while leveling. Then you get Hypothermia, and then you get Frostwall. This is like your starter build. You know, you start with Frost, then you get the Bolt, and then you get Hypothermia, and then you get onto Wall. These 2 are like end game. You know, the Comet and the Cast on Freeze. So let's talk the next one. Hypothermia. So with Hypothermia, this is a debuff. So it's a curse, and you place this on an enemy, and it debuffs them. So it applies a long-standing curse that reduces their cold resistance. As we talked about cold resistance, you can use Alt to look at it. Cold damage is one of the 5 damage types. It is reduced by cold resistance. So you want to not have your cold damage reduced. So you want to pierce their cold resistance or reduce their cold resistance. So what we put in here is we have Persistence. So this means that the curse will last for 40% longer. And then we have Hex Bloom. Curses from support skills spread to enemies within 3 meters when a cursed enemy dies. So you curse your enemies, and this uses a lot of mana. This uses like 157 mana. So Hex Bloom is really, really good at spreading it while you're moving around. You drop it on a pack of enemies, you beat a couple, and it spreads to everything around it. Really good. And then finally, Heightened Curse, 25% increased effect of supported curses. I don't know which of these you get earliest, but just get the first ones you can get, and then as you get the high level support gems, get the rest of them. Okay, next you'll unlock Frost Wall. This is one of my favorite abilities while leveling, and one of my least favorite at endgame. This will slow you down, but give you incredible amounts of defense. So this basically puts up a giant wall, these big ice walls that you can hide behind. The reason it's so good while leveling is as you're walking through with your bad armor that you haven't upgraded and you haven't got any good drops, you're walking through and you get like 6 enemies run at you. You you build a wall and nothing can get through. So you are completely protected. On top of that, you can just shoot your frost bolts through the wall and shatter the wall to deal damage and hit everything behind them because they go through your wall anyway. So yeah, this is a really, really, really powerful ability. I take Font of Mana to get increased mana regen while these walls are up. You take Glaciation, so they deal 40%, 50% more freeze buildup. These are, you get 3 of these cast at a time. So you can dump 3 of these instantly. So enemies run at you, you go Frost Wall, Frost Wall, everything freezes. On bosses, you triple cast Frost Wall and everything, you build up a ton of frost buildup and they're almost frozen. Then you take Icicle. Ice crystal created by support skills have 50% less life. Doesn't make sense because they're your protection. However, they deal huge amounts of damage, so you want to shatter them. You also then go into your skill tree and you take this cluster here. You come up from the bottom, you go right, you can search life or crystal, and you get these two here. You get ice walls for increased crystal life, or you can take shattered crystals for 60% reduced ice crystal life. I would take this one here, 60% reduced ice crystal life. Then you have 60% reduced crystal life and you have 50% reduced crystal life. So you're basically got these really fragile ice walls that you can just shoot through and just shatter them and destroy everything that's behind them. So yeah, really, really good combo. And then that's pretty much it. I would say that's it. I don't really want to talk about Comet much. That's everything. You have all of your abilities now and you just deal tons of damage. And then what you want to be doing is you walk into a fight. The first thing you would do is you would hypothermia if there's a yellow or a red or a high health mob that's going to take you a while to defeat, or a boss. You'd hypothermia it. Then you want to go into ice walls, drop a bunch of ice walls, drop your frost, and then just frost bolts. Just keep casting frost bolts. Everything's going to freeze. Comets are going to come down. Rinse and repeat. That's it, really. If you want to get a bit spicy, if you want to mix it up, what you can do is you can take frost bolt, you can take Comet out of your setup and use a gem. So if you go to use a gem now, all you can do is upgrade the level of your gem. If you take Comet out of your abilities, like if you just drag it out like that, what happens is when you go to use one of these gems, you can get another Comet, and you can use multiple of the same. So you can have one Comet in Cast on Freeze, and you can have a second Comet down here. I've put in Inevitable Critical and then Super Critical to give it really high crits, but I'll be honest, you don't really use it. You won't really use it. There are some bosses where you can stun lock them, and then when they're completely frozen and stunned and they're not moving, you can just Comet, and it feels pretty fun. But overall, I wouldn't recommend doing this. I don't think it's worth doing over just casting Frostbolt, but it's fun, right? And it's fun to just cast loads of Comets while the Comets are also coming down. So I've put it in here anyway. But yeah, that's all of the abilities. Hopefully that helps. If you have any questions, let me know down below. If you have any recommendations or advice, let me know as well. I'm always looking to improve this. I'm going to play this at endgame, so I'm going to try the spiral next. I want to try the spiral in this build at endgame, the Eye of Winter. But for leveling, this is what I used, and it was really, really strong. So I really hope it helps, because Sorcerer felt quite bad until this combo kicked in. So yeah. Okay, now let's talk about the passive tree. So I'm not going to go over this like point by point everywhere I would go. I'm going to talk about the main things to head towards. I've linked this entire tree as I've got it right now down below in the Mobalytics build if you want to just use that. But let's talk about the main things to look at. What you can do here is you can search cold, you can search freeze, things like that, and they're all really good. But what you're looking for is cold damage, freeze build up, mana regen, because comets cost a lot of mana, and then also energy shield. While leveling, unless you're getting really lucky, your gear's going to suck. So energy shield does help while leveling. You can respec out that into more damage if you want, but this is how I built it. I came up on the left side, took the increased spell damage, I took the increased cold and freeze build up, I came into this middle section here and took cast speed and mana regen, and this node here increased energy shield. Going up to the next section, all the way here for cold, to penetrate cold resistance. Then down into this cluster here for spell damage and cast speed. It's really simple, right? It's mana regen. There's nothing crazy. This section here, you want this cluster here all for cold damage, for freeze buildup and cold damage. And then you want to get this here, increased cold exposure effect. So the way cold exposure works is it's a debuff that lowers the enemy's resistance. So that's the start. I would literally just start like that. I would just run it like that. We talked about this node up here. I wouldn't stress it. While leveling, you don't even have cast on freeze. So don't even think about this early on. And there's this cluster here, which is kind of hard to get to early on unless you cut it through here. But I would ignore this section while leveling. I'd run it down the middle and get these, and then I'd come up to here and get these, and then I'd work to the top and get this big star, this big snowflake. So I'd get this. Chill duration, magnitude of chill, freeze build up, levels to cold skills, damage penetrates is cold resistant. All this stuff is incredible. Cold damage, all this stuff is incredible. Okay, once you've done this like straight line technique and you've got all this stuff around here, I would start running it right. You can either run it along the top first, get this cluster and this cluster, or you can go here and get the reduced ice crystal life. I'd personally go along the top and you get more value from the top first. So you can run along the top all the way down to here. You get this section here for your increased energy, and then you can get this recover mana when you invoke a spell, which is massive, and then increase spell damage. There's a really good cluster. And then as you come down, you're right near this big freeze one. Hits ignore elemental resistance, and you get freeze build-up, cast speed with cold skills, skill duration, freeze build-up, damage against frozen enemies. This is so good. So good on bosses. You freeze enemies, you bring down those comets, massive damage. So yeah, that's it. Then you get the ice crystal last if you want. That's where I am with the build. I've also got 1, 2, 3 gem slots, which is nice. As I play more, and I'm like level, doesn't want to say, I'm level 67. As I get a higher level, I'll make a better end game build. But while leveling, this is what I would be working towards. I finished the campaign around 60 something, so this should fit you well all the way through the campaign. If you want to take more defenses, you can just go into here and search, energy shield, and you can work your way into more defensive nodes. If you want to get more damage, you can do the opposite and type in like cold or spell damage and go get more. Same with mana regen. But this is a good basic starting outline. So I hope this helps. There's not really much else to talk about. That's pretty much it. I don't really want to say much on gear because while leveling, gear sucks. Gear just doesn't drop very often. Try and get yourself a good staff. I got the Gelid staff and crafted with it. Got it with like spell damage, increased cast speed, intelligence, cold damage, spell damage, that kind of thing. Try and get yourself a good staff. I've got a full video on my channel on how to craft and how to get these good weapons while leveling and good armor while leveling. So try and do that if you can. But yeah, that I won't go on too much. Check the shops, craft your gear a little bit, try and get some good spell damage, some good cold damage. But yeah, that's everything. I hope this has helped. Very early on, we're kind of testing the waters with Path of Exile builds because we're all still learning. But I really hope this has helped. This is the most fun I had on Sorcerer with this build, so I really wanted to share it. If it has helped, do consider subscribing to the channel. I'm going to be playing a lot of Path of Exile and making builds, guides, things like that. Any tips for other people or for me, any improvements you would make to the build, let us know in the comments. But that's it from me. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.